The connection that you as a performer have with your audience can be a truly amazing, life-changing experience, not only for yourself, but for the audience member. And sometimes after all that practice and all that work on programming and stage movements and all the things that go on in between, you just get lost in the moment of the show, and 2 hours later, it's like you've spent a week with dear friends and family. Hi, everybody. My name's Jeff Price. I'm a little under the weather, but I wanted to welcome each of you to Intentional Musicianship, and this is a podcast where we talk about all things that happens to get to center stage, whether it be performance practice and showmanship or storytelling, and all points in between. And recently, I went to hear a group called the Canadian Brass at the Robinson Grand Theater in Clarksburg, West Virginia. And it's one of those rare concerts where every element, from the pacing to the humor, it felt intentionally designed for connection and maximum communication for the audience. And so I thought really quickly, until my voice gives out, we'll unpack a couple of those elements that made the show effective and what we as performers and educators can learn from it. So the first thing was, one of those obvious things about performance practice. Their playing was impeccable. But what struck me wasn't just their technical mastery, it's how they used it. Really dug in deep with the programming. Most of the pieces were short, 3 to 5 minutes. They had it perfectly paced for really great attention for the audience and a lot of variety. So if someone didn't like something or weren't versed in brass quintet, they would enjoy the show. Even their classic finisher, which is from the opera Carmen, was treated as a visual skit. And they had wigs and a tuba bull, or the tuba player was dressed like a bull charging across the stage. And it made it really fun, almost hilarious, you might say, and it was really musically tight. It made a lot of sense as a presentation. And that's something worth noting. They didn't need those long pieces to prove their musicianship. They proved it through how they presented the entire evening, through their pacing, through their humor, through that variety. They played well, but they played smart. Now, another thing that was really interesting about this performance, it's a brass quintet. You can only use 5 chairs, and in this case, 5 tablet stands, because they were digital. And what they would do is they would set up or slightly change the stage between pieces. Maybe someone would change seats. Maybe they would stand up. Maybe they would move the chairs to the back. I mean, hey, when they walked in, they walked on to Just a Closer Walk with Thee, and they joked that they wanted to get an encore to make sure we got one to start the whole program. So they were using these iPads instead of paper, and that eliminated a lot of the distractions that sometimes we take for granted because we didn't see them laboring over page turns. We'd have to worry about music falling down or fluttering. We didn't have to worry about awkward mid-piece fidgeting and wondering if it gets caught in the wind, if it might turn pages. I remember I was doing a clarinet event here a couple months ago, and that auditorium, no matter what I did with my music, it just wanted to turn. So I had to keep putting stuff up against that music. So anyway, it made their movement feel effortless because it was planned out. Now, for smaller groups, that's an easy way to modernize. And they didn't do it just to be current or technical for tech's sake. They did it because it helped reduce friction so the performance feels natural. Here, probably a year and a half ago, I got to see Molly B. And Squeezebox. That's a polka group, and I love Molly B. from many years ago. You'd see her on RFD TV, and her husband Ted Lang have a wonderful group and a great reputation and many Hall of Fames for polka. And even that group was using the technology to make it very effective to change music and staging and do all those things, exactly like the Canadian Brass did. So another thing we can take from this is that, boy, They use humor and their own personalities to build trust. Now, last year I talked about the Menozel Brass, which is a generally same kind of a group, but as much as they are the same, they're a lot different. But this was a common point that they had. Now, in this case, they had every member speak at some point in time. They were introducing the pieces with humor and personality, because this is how we got to know them. The pieces don't stand by themselves. We get brought in and part of that group because we get to know people. We understand, after we've met the tuba player and understand his humor, that when he starts to spin his horn slowly during Tuba Tiger Rag, we were deeply connected because we were invested in him the whole time. Every time his poor old aching back would hurt or anything like that. And so that was just sort of funny. Now, at the end, we might talk a little bit about some of the unique things, but they even put things like what they were going to sell into the show. And I recommend this. That was a great thing in Branson, that they would always put some of their products in the show, whether it be fudge or some other thing like that. So in this case, they sold socks, and they sold socks at intermission. They sold socks before the show and after the show. And you're going, socks? Yeah. Well, they pointed out that they were all wearing socks. Now that sounds small, and it's a cool inside joke where everybody was showing off their socks, but each of them were wearing it. They were, I guess cute as socks go. And it gave people an opportunity to connect with them by buying the socks, but at the same time, it was sort of fun to have musical socks. And I tell you, there was a lot of musicians. And so part of that experience could be that buying experience as part of the connection. We got a little musical product, and then they get money from that. And so I thought that was sort of interesting. So if they didn't build that rapport by talking and playing well and doing everything they did with this excellence, then things wouldn't have gone so well. But in this case, they built brand trust, so to speak, with everything they did. They had a clear identity, and they kept delivering consistently on what they said. And us as an audience, we felt like a part of their family, their community. Now, one thing I did notice in the show was that sometimes you as a performer are on a cutting edge of something where the venue just hasn't figured it out yet. Now, this is a small quibble, but it's not, and it's easy to overcome. But as you talk to your sponsors and you talk to things, you're going to find out there are times that sometimes you have to bridge old norms with what the group actually wants. So this was the tension point. The venue, as they invited us, showed us around the auditorium and let us know what events were coming up and how that Canadian brass got to our venue in our local North Central West Virginia area, talked about the experience that we were going to have and how we would make this pure and wonderful, and everybody should put away your cell phones because those lights are annoying, and we should just be together as one community. And so we're pretty respectful up here in West Virginia, and we go, great, we'll put away our phones. This will be a great evening. What turned out, by the end of the concert, they were asking us to take out our phones because we didn't have our phones out. They wanted us, as part of the event, to use our phones to take pictures. And so it is interesting. Sometimes you might have a disconnect. And so we want to make sure that when we have something that we think we're doing well to try to give a sense of community, that maybe the performer or there might be a disconnect between the performer or the venue. And so modern audience expectations, and I have this in many episodes, is that we use social media. We like to take pictures. We like to post. They want you to post, especially in this particular concert. And there was a disconnect with that. So easy to reconcile that thing, but it was just something to learn and grow from. And I know I go to an event at my alma mater at West Virginia University. Every large concert in the concert theater, they have a legacy, old, terrible recording, and that's the only way I can put it, and it's probably the most negative thing I can probably say, but it's only because we go to the program or we go there and there's a digital program and they want us to get a digital program, but then they say put away your phones, but they want you to look at the program. They went to the whole point of creating the program, but they won't let you look at it. And I think that's because that's also a disconnect. I mean, they're even telling you to turn off your pagers. It's so old of recording. So that's just one of those things. And so that was the one odd thing in the concert when you're trying to do this. So connection today sometimes means that we need to invite the audience to document what's happening. It doesn't suppress joy. It actually encourages it and encourages connection in a different way. Now, we could have just sat there with no cell phones. We would have been just happy. But the funny thing was, I don't think that the performers, by their reaction and encouragement to get our phones out, knew that that was happening. And my final point before I go through some takeaways was the business model for this. And it's something that we just need to look as even though you're a performer, you're going to go around and you're going to be an audience member and look at the cost of the tickets and how things happen. Now, the tickets for where I sat, only $15. The fanciest seats, $65. And there were a couple points in between. Now, this was made possible because of a local arts foundation grant. And that same thing happened earlier in the year with Branford Marsalis, that this generous gift was then presented to the theater to hire them. And so they got their money, the Canadian Brass, from the grant. Then the ticket sales then would replenish the grant. And so then the extra money they get was from the sock sales and other things that they were selling. Now, I bring that up is because the rest of the people in that Robinson Grand, $65, $75 a ticket. My mother went to a concert that was a little bit later in the week, and then my daughter went too. It was a whole bunch of Christian artists. Well, it was sold out, and the cheapest ticket was $48. The cheapest ticket was $15, and we were around half full. And so when you look at the marketplace and what people wanted, it was interesting. So then I looked at all the prices of all the things, the imitation bands of ABBA, the imitation bands of Queen, and all the things that come through the area, the Beatles imitation band. All those tickets were in the higher level range where, like Branford Marsalis, again, I got a $15 ticket because of the local arts foundation. The business models are different for different kind of concerts. And so as you assess what you're doing, and you might not even charge for your tickets depending on what kind of organization you are or how you're giving to the community, or if it's just like your recital, so to speak, or if you're part of a college. But when you have tickets and things like that, it's really interesting to see why and how that's supported and how you can then link to that to then get people to maybe understand and participate with that, so there'd be more things in the future. Sort of interesting that way. So I thought it was just really interesting that an ensemble as great as the Canadian Brass and internationally known and very famous came to our community. They even canceled a concert in Pittsburgh that was sold out because I don't know why. It was different reasons. I think they still did an educational event, but for whatever reason they had to cancel it. They were sold out. But in this case, they didn't cancel. And my opinion is probably because they got the upfront pay from this grant. And I imagine, from what I understand, that grant was very helpful in their decision-making process. And that model freed them to focus on the experience. It wasn't like what you might find in other genres where the people that are marketing the event are calling about ticket sales every day, and they're making decisions on whether to postpone the event or do it another time or cancel altogether because it doesn't support the tour because they're not making enough money. And it's very interesting in our musical world how people have to project because it is a business. And so in the end, because of this grant, it gave this community world-class art and access at an affordable price. And so depending on how you're doing things, You're going to have to look at this and figure out what's available and how you fit into that versus if you need to have a certain amount of money in order to make that performance happen. So to finish out, I just wanted to ask you, when was the last time you had such a structured event that every piece, from the playing, the showmanship, had that visual arc, had that audience participation, felt personally connected? That Canadian Brass didn't just play music. They hosted an experience where we felt like family by the end of the show. Even on social media, almost instantly after the concert, they were thanking the sponsors and us in the area for attending. Again, I just wanted to say thanks for listening to Intentional Musicianship. When I look at the numbers and I see the growth, I'm very appreciative. And it's just a reminder that each of you that take time to listen every week are very special to me, and I love to get to hear from each of you. And you can always reach out to us in Intentional Musicianship if you have anything you'd like to say or anything you'd like a comment on, or something that maybe I go down a different path. I'm all ears. But in the end, remember, every stage moment that you have, it has a chance to build trust and turn those spectators into fans. And fans is always short for that fanatic. And so I hope you would join us again on the next time of Intentional Musicianship, where my voice is probably, hopefully, a little bit stronger. See you next time.